April the 22nd, 2017. As I'm going to do an update from the blackouts from yesterday. Now they're calling it totally surreal. Blackouts hit LA, New York, and San Francisco. Now when they say totally surreal, it's when you imagine hundreds of thousands of people stuck on subways, 90-degree heat in some locations, and it's lights out, no traffic lights, things like that. And what it does, after you kind of stop, I guess, freaking out about it, is make you realize that these things could happen at any time. And one thing that I've seen from the hurricanes in this area, guys, you just have to suck it up. I mean, 2 weeks after Katrina, I've talked about it 100 times. No electricity, no water, 2 weeks. Driving to another city, waiting in long lines for gas, having to, because you couldn't get gas, 2 or 3 families in one car going to get groceries again in another city. 2 weeks. That's a long time. And during hurricane season, especially right after Katrina, we were in the 100-degree range with 100% humidity. I mean, it was tough. But anyway, we're not big city here like they are there. We're not as dependent on, we don't have subways in the South, guys. Things like that. And so we're not as dependent, but we still are for all the other needs. But as far as transportation, except for gasoline, it's not the same thing. So they had a movie moment, just like in Hollywood, guys, when they say totally surreal. Let's take a look at some of this information. It says power outages hit LA, New York, and San Francisco, leaving commuters stranded and traffic backed up Friday. About 90,000 customers were affected in San Francisco, while the outages occurred around the same time. Think about this, guys. There's no evidence that they were connected or coordinated. Maybe not coordinated, but I think they're definitely connected. We'll see. And that's what we're looking at, is the possibilities. We've heard about Gotham Shield yesterday, and there's reports on it today happening and what Gotham Shield is, guys, I'm sure you've seen the videos, is a drill about a nuclear or an EMP attack with power outages in the big cities. How would people respond? Now, it may be key to trying to locate the cause of this by looking at the time. It says New York. The first outage occurred at around 7:20 a.m. in New York when the power went down at 7th Avenue and 53rd Street subway station. That sent a shockwave of delays into the rest of the subway system. Now, guys, they have these check systems put in place to where if instead of getting a cascading effect throwing off one power zone after the other, it stops it. But this didn't happen for some reason. Several subway lines suspended power after loss at 53rd Street. This is from the MTA. A Metropolitan Transportation Authority spokesman told that some passengers were stranded on trains. Some cars were dark except for phone lights, and some riders say their commutes took 2 to 3 hours and the stations were packed. They're calling it a commuter chaos. Subway service crippled along multiple lines after an MTA power snafu. The guys, the only experience that I've had with subways is a few years ago when we went to the American Spring and handed out all the information about American Spring in Washington, D.C. And we were staying in a hotel over in Virginia across the river, so we had to ride a subway over into Washington, D.C. area. Most of the time, sometimes we were able to take the truck, but during the events that we were seeing, one of the events was the 400,000 bikers there for the POWMIA event. Tremendous. We've got videos, go back and look at that a few years ago. But guys, the city life for a country boy, I don't know how to say it, and I'm not trying to insult anyone, but there's something wrong with it. There's too many people trapped and too many tight places, subways, stacked buildings, big buses, things like that. And Christ said, woe unto those that build house upon house. And this is what he was talking about. Not only is it crowded and you've got limited resources, but disease and things like that. But either way, now they're saying the loss of power due to a Con Edison equipment failure during the morning rush hour caused a cascading effect and impacted the lives of thousands of commuters. Now, Cuomo came in a statement, and this is what's wrong with America. This is what's wrong with most of the Democratic leadership in Washington. Cuomo said, simply put, this is completely unacceptable. Guys, when these things happen, how can you say it's unacceptable? You better get real, because these things are going to continue and they're going to get more intense. Unacceptable. I would run this dude out of office. Unacceptable hell. You need to get out there and look at the real cause. We're dealing with over 700 kilometers per second solar winds, guys, and normally, we're going to look at that. Normally, when it gets that high, over 1.3 million miles an hour, the proton density goes down. In other words, it's like smoke in the wind. The higher the wind, the less smoke per cubic inch. You understand what I'm saying? If it's coming from a fire. So as we see these intense solar winds increase, the proton density goes down. Right now, it's extremely high for this tight wind, 700 kilometers per second. Normally, your proton density is 2 to 3. Now we're dealing with 13, maybe 3 to 4 times the normal rate. So the impact is greater. The electrical energy being hit, that is hitting our grid, is incredible. And it is similar to the Carrington event. Now, we are not as susceptible to the downtime or the effect of a CME that they were then. It burned up. If you go back to the Carrington event, it burned up the telegraph lines. It electrocuted operators that were tapping out the code on the telegraphs, things like that. Now we have more grounded systems, more hardened systems, but not nearly enough. Now, Con Edison in New York is saying that one of its electric lines triggered the outage. Spokesman Alan Drury said that it's not clear how long the repairs will take or how the failure occurred. And late yesterday afternoon, guys, they had a lot of this back up. They were running, confirmed the generators were running again at the stations. But what we're looking at is New York to California. Even though we have these safety networks to stop a cascading event, something happened. Now, what time did it happen in New York? Remember, 7:30 a.m.? And one of the accounts there kind of paints the surreal picture. A lady named Liz Baker came in and said, it took me an hour and 20 minutes to go to one stop. Gave up, found my way out of the mob, then walked back home. And that, guys, can be a very dangerous situation. Now, later in the morning, power outages were reported in Los Angeles International Airport, as well as several other areas around the city. San Francisco, the power outages were widespread. The utility company Pacific Gas and Electric said a series of outages began at 9 a.m., and within 30 minutes, about 90,000 customers lost power. All businesses with the lights off, no traffic lights, nothing. Think about that. Because you've got a lot of traffic, guys, in these big cities. And you've got cable cars that are electric. PG&E spokesman Tamar Sarkinson said crews are assessing the situation, but there's no immediate estimate for when the power will be restored. They didn't know at first. And what they're saying, the officials are pointing to a substation fire as the primary cause of the outage, but have given no public estimates to when it will be restored. Now, this was yesterday, but this substation fires and all, guys, when you send this type of energy into the inner atmosphere of the planet and through the magnetic lines of force, then that's what's causing it. You're overloading the grid. It's like a solar EMP, and that's what we're dealing with. Guys, just remember this. We've got, right now, very high solar winds tonight. We have a coronal mass ejection headed our way. There was about 2 more today that were smaller. 2 sunspots turning our way, and the coronal hole goes from the north pole of the sun to the south. And what that is a clear day on the sun without the magnetic canopy in that area. What a magnetic canopy does, guys, is as energy is released from the sun, these big lines and loops take that energy and bring it back down to the surface. But when you have a coronal hole, or what I call a clear day, that energy is broadcast straight into space, and when they're Earth facing, we get the brunt of it. Now, could it have been cyber attacks? Sure, it could have been. Could it have been Operation Gotham Shield? Could have been. Or again, is that a diversion? The two things that kind of remind me of things that would happen during a cyber attack, guys, is electrical grid outage. But another thing that happens, and this happened in San Francisco, the power went out in the financial district. They're saying from Presidio down to Marina, Calhoun area. This is coming out of San Francisco Chronicle. They lost power. Trading was shut down. Traffic lights were out at scores of intersections, and cars backed up on downtown streets as drivers grew frustrated and honked at each other. This is why I'm saying this can become a dangerous situation. BART's, which is the transit, Montgomery Station was closed for more than 2 hours with trains running through the station without stopping before the agency reopened it. All cable cars are down, as well as several mini bus lines that typically run on electricity from overhead wires. Shuttles were put in place to provide service, according to the MTA. The blackout took out traffic signals, affecting office buildings, with residents and workers in the area calling it totally surreal. No elevators. 21 schools in San Francisco were affected by the outage that affected utilities, including the internet, but they remained open and their schedules adjusted. Families were to be notified if there were changes at the schools. The Philip Burton Federal Building and U.S. Courthouse were closed down by the outage. The San Francisco Fire Department said it had responded to more than 100 calls for service since a power outage struck a large area of the city. Now, guys, there were hospitals going down with emergency equipment that went down. Emergency generators had to come back and kick in. In downtown San Francisco, shops were shuttered, people on the streets, many fire trucks. Says the department tweeted that the calls coming in included 20 elevators with people stuck inside. The department adds that there have been no delays in responding to calls. Yeah, that's surreal, guys, when it's going from East Coast to West. Now, it's not everything in between, but when you're dependent like this, and guys, electricity is a new tool in the history of this planet. You think about thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and just in the last 100 years, we're in the situation we are now as far as this dependency. And people aren't ready for it, just like the mayor of New York. It's unacceptable. What the hell are you going to do when tribulations hit? Are you going to tell God this is unacceptable? You're going to be laughed at just the way that real people on the ground are laughing at you tonight, Mayor Cuomo. Now, at 7:20 p.m. Central Time tonight, solar wind is at 689.1 kilometers per second, well over 1 million miles per hour. Here's the density of the protons, 11.8 protons centimeter cubed. Guys, that's extremely strong. It's a lot of energy that is normally not involved with the solar wind, so we're kind of getting a double whammy here. Also, watch for the auroras in the northern hemisphere tonight, and we're still inside the Lyrid meteor shower. They're saying now you could get 10 to 20 per hour. We're in a new moon. Now, guys, I'm under thunderstorm conditions right now. I'm not sure if you can hear the rain and stuff in the microphone, but if you're in a clear area, these could be impressive. So check it out. Get some pictures if you can. As we don't know exactly what happened, I'm thinking it is the solar wind with the effect of the CMEs that are being thrown off the sun, and our shields are weak because of the solar minimum. But we're watching it. It's a heads up. Be safe.